What's up, everybody? Welcome into, it's been a busy week. I'm almost sick of saying, and welcome into another episode of the Celtics Talk podcast. I hope you're not sick of it yet, but we were having fun this week in the ramp up to the Celtics first round playoff matchup, going through and spotlighting key pieces of this team that have been instrumental in getting them to that number 2 seed and positioning them for what is hopefully a intriguing and long playoff run. We already did Brad. We did Ime. Today, shifting gears, and we're going with Marcus Smart as sort of the quarterback of all this, the glue of the Boston Celtics. And, you know, it's funny when we were recording some of these videos with our video team, you can go check those out at NBCSportsBoston.com. A lot of us in the office talking about these key pieces. And the question was like, what was the expectation for Marcus Smart coming into the year? It really made me think. It was like, you know, a lot of people were ruffled when Marcus signed his 4-year, $77 million extension, wondering if the Celtics maybe missed out on an opportunity. There was a lot of chatter, and I'm probably guilty of this as well, about Lonzo Ball and should the Celtics have pursued him in the offseason, and what's the deal with the point guard. The one thing that Marcus Smart always said is that at every level of his career, from high school to Oklahoma State to, you know, various times in his NBA career, whenever he played point guard, that was like his natural position, and he felt like he thrived at it. But with the Celtics, he always had someone in front of him: Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker. There was always like an all-star point guard that sort of shuffled Marcus to 2 guard. And, you know, when you're in that shooting guard role, like you're looking for offense a little more than trying to create it. So, but it was fair to wonder, like, can Marcus be the point guard? The one thing I kept going back to was the numbers were just always glowing. There's analytic sites out there like Cleaning the Glass that can tell you how Marcus performs when he's in that point guard role, when he's the clear-cut director of the offense. And the Celtics on-off numbers were always like really good. And now it wasn't always the biggest sample size. And there was one year in there that was a little messy. But like I'd say 3 out of the 4 years where he had enough minutes, it was really good. So it was intriguing to think, could he be the point guard of this team? And much like everyone on the Celtics, he comes out of the gates and everyone struggles a little bit and the assist percentage doesn't go up. It was understandable that there was questions out there about whether he could be the guy for the Celtics. Well, it's also telling that all these months later, as we sort of look at the inflection point and the change in the season, well, everyone goes back to January 23rd, and 2 things happened that day. Jason Tatum went to a whole nother level with the way he scored the basketball and his efficiency and his superstar launch, his annual superstar launch. But it's also the day Marcus Smart came back from COVID. And I think he just played, you know, if you listened last week, we had Marcus on here talking about his season. And I kept kind of peppering him about what changed. Like, Marcus definitely came back and upped the tempo and pushed the ball a little bit more. Tommy Heinsohn would have loved the way the Celtics played over the final 35, 36 games of the year. But he just seemed to find the right balance and embrace it. You know, didn't need shots unless the Celtics needed it on that night, or if we're missing somebody and they needed more offense. Marcus bought into everything that the Celtics needed out of him, and it just became a different team. And to the point where it sort of answered the question, and like emphatically so, that he could be the point guard of this squad. I think you look at those starting 5 numbers and what the just the way they dominated on both sides of the ball with Marcus out there. He deserves a lot of the credit for what they did this year and the turnaround. And now Brad Stevens looks like a little bit of a genius getting him in at that money. You know, probably as the salary cap inflates, you know, it's going to be a lower tier salary for a player who a starter. And now Marcus, if he wins Defensive Player of the Year, you know, his 2-way impact is going to be greater than what his salary affords. But certainly, you know, even as we neared the trade deadline, that was hovering it over it all. And I thought it was interesting that Marcus sort of said last week that, you know, maybe there was on his mind that there's always this notion of what's his future in Boston. It's been that way for years now. The one person who dances in the trade rumors every year. And it's also a lot easier for a team that was, you know, scuffling a little bit to think, you know, do you want to trade Jalen or Jason and your pillars, or are you going to trade some of the complementary pieces and hope that inspires them to kind of figure it out? The biggest thing that I can say about Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka is, you know, they stuck with it, you know, just had this belief in the vision, in their talent, and were rewarded richly over those final half of the 2021-22 season. So to kind of get a glimpse of like how good it's been for Marcus Smart and how rewarding it's been, I went and got his high school coach, Kenny Boren, also runs his young game changer camps during the summer. He's been along with Marcus for pretty much every step of the journey. Has been in his ear, been a mentor, and led him along through the ups and downs. And for everyone around Marcus, it's got to be super satisfying to see where it landed this year and to finally get that respect as defensive player, potential defensive player of the year, and the way he's quarterbacked this offense. I wanted to get Kenny's opinion on all of Marcus's trials and tribulations and how nice it must be to see it all come to fruition this year. So here's our interview with Kenny Boren. All right, Kenny, the reason I wanted to get you on this podcast, you've been around for every step of Marcus's basketball journey. How rewarding has it been from the contract extension before the season to him cementing himself as the quarterback of this team to defensive player of the year potential? How satisfying has it been to watch him sort of achieve everything this year?
I think that this year in particular, it's been really, I don't know how to say it. It's been really amazing, in his 8th year, and he's having, in my opinion, the best season of his career. And so I think that's pretty rare. I think a lot of people peak, 3, 4, 5 years, but I consider him kind of a old veteran now, and he's still peaking, like he's still moving in that direction upwards. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool to hear the talk of DPOY that's going on. Of course, I feel like he's deserved that for a while, but I'm a little bit biased. But it's been a really cool journey, and it's cool that it's pinnacled. It keeps going up, and this year's kind of a pinnacle. And I have a feeling next year will be a new pinnacle. And he just continues to amaze me. That's for sure.
What is it about Marcus that allowed him to, weather those ups and downs and just always remain confident that, he could emerge as a player like this?
Well, he's a very unique person and player. I mean, his circle is very small. I think probably one of his greatest qualities is that he never lets his highs get too high and his lows get too low. I think he does a pretty good job of keeping balanced. And like anybody, especially if you're playing in the NBA or a professional sport, that's tough sometimes. Sometimes emotions get the best of you. And I think he's done, especially as he's gotten older, a much better job of keeping the highs not too high and the lows not too low, and trying to keep it kind of even keeled. But he just always keeps a very balanced perspective on things, and sometimes he has to calm me down.
He admitted last year that there was some stuff personally that with the pandemic going on, it weighed on him. How do you see a different player this year, just in terms of whether it's just embracing it? He said he's had to refine the joy a little bit. And I think it permeates through him when he's playing now. He's just being the player that I think everyone knew that he could be.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think there's a lot to that question. That would take a lot more than just an interview. I mean, I think the two big things that I think people overlook about last season, when you mention the word joy and things like that, you got to remember these NBA people play 2 seasons in a year, basically. I mean, they crammed that season. They had no break. And so they crammed last season right after the prior seasons. The last 2 seasons, were tricky. I mean, you got to remember if you look at the time span, I don't know what it was. It wasn't a year, but it was close. I mean, they put an abbreviated season and a full season into a year, basically. And I don't care who you are. When you're playing that many, and then the bubble, you throw the bubble in there, that's just not as fun, man. I mean, it's no fans. I mean, so there's a lot to that word joy. There's a lot to it that kind of steals from that. And then, the contract extension, I don't care who you are, unless you're just a LeBron type player, that takes pressure off. Anytime you do that, you always think you can get more money, but what people don't understand is that if you don't take that extension, then you're playing there's a lot of pressure on you that final year to get to a free agency. And so I'm glad that he did that. He's glad that he did that. It takes pressure off and allows you to just play. And I think that has a lot to do with how free he's played. And then I think there's a third dynamic. And then Ime's done an unbelievable job this year from so many different perspectives. But just giving Marcus the confidence to be the point guard, not putting him in the corner, but letting him control the offense. Just puts a lot of. I just think that's where his position is, and that he's a great passer. He sees the floor. His IQ's high, and I think that's really kind of come to fruition with everybody on the team with the decisions that he's made with the ball in his hands.
I mean, did that surprise you? Because I think it was funny to me. The numbers always bore out when he was the point guard. And he just was in a situation where it was always Isaiah, Kemba, Kyrie. Like they always had another point guard.
Guards, yeah. Yeah.
But like whenever he did have the ability to quarterback that team, good things happen. So you must have had full confidence going into this year that he could thrive in that role.
I did, but it's a lot harder from my seat. I mean, Brad Stevens, or you're trying to run an NBA team and you've got players like IT and God, think of the guards that have come through there, Kemba. Mm-hmm. That's not easy, man. I mean, you can't say, well, that's not an easy decision to make. And especially when you're dealing with those level of point guards, true point guards, IT and Kemba and the other ones that have come through there, but mainly those two. Yeah. So that's been a little bit difficult. So it's been cool to see, not necessarily them leave, because Marcus loves those. He's friends with the guys. And those two guys are just the coolest people in the world, but them, moving on in their careers and then opening up kind of that position for Marcus to take over and own, and Ime giving him that trust, has really panned out well.
What do you mentioned the whole Ime dynamic. I was talking to Marcus about it last week, and he loves that he's just sort of a straight shooter. Is Marcus the type of guy who can take that, whatever, like that honest criticism and find a way to harness it?
Absolutely. I think most players would like, just a coach that tells you straight up how it is. And so, yeah, Ime's definitely a straight shooter and is going to be blunt, and he just speaks to them, as professionals and sometimes just as basketball players. And Ime knows what he's doing and has done a really good job with that.
Now just take me back. Like, what is the biggest area of growth you've seen from Marcus from when you first got a hold of him at the high school age and to where he is now? And how much has he evolved as either a person, as a player? Like what jumps out most to you?
I mean, he's just he's a man now. I mean, I've seen him since he was a pup. So it's been really cool to see him grow just into a young man, and he's dealt with so many things in his life personally. I mean, in recent history, just the passing of his mom, and, she was so close to all of us. I mean, that lady was a kind of a figurehead in the whole scheme of the circle. So that was really tough, and he's handled that really, really well. He's just grown up, man. I mean, it's just a different smart, and it's cool. And it's a blessing to have been a part of all this, to see him go from an 8th grader, that ran the show and was a stud, to a high school player that won multiple state championships, that ran the show, to Oklahoma State, where he ran the show, to his AAU teams, where he ran the show and was a stud, to his USA Olympic teams, the USA teams that he just dominated in. He's just always been a winner. I mean, I've used that word with a lot of interviews, and he's just a winner. He cares about one thing and one thing only, and that's the value of the basketball. You have to value the ball, which is why he'll do anything to take it from somebody, just to win. He hasn't lost much in his whole life, and so he's just always won. And so I don't know I know it's kind of cliche, but he's just like the epitome of a winner.
Mm-hmm. Let's finish it up with the defensive player of the year talk. I love your Twitter feed because you're always grabbing the when we get with those nuggets out there, you're pushing the case.
Watch it, man. Watch it on my Twitter. I'm just super biased, man. Like the guards get no love, man. Like here's my deal, and I'll try to speak from this not from a biased perspective, but the NBA has kind of gone away from the bigs title. Nobody wants to be a big. Even Robert Williams is classified, I think, as a forward. I don't even think his official classification is a big. So, like, if we're going to do that, and that's kind of where the league has gone over the past decade, which is no more, Akeem Olajuwons or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. There's no bigs. Everyone's a guard, kind of like, okay, if we're going to do that, And then combine that with how the league over the past year has become a ball screen league, and it has. Like, the NBA is about ball screens, and that's how it's been for about 10 years now. Then it's time to recognize a guard. If we're all guards, and that's what everybody says they are, you ask anybody, you can be 7 foot tall, and they're going to say they're a guard or a forward. If that's the case, then it's time to get it to a guard. And because the league is so ball screen oriented, and in my opinion, illegal ball screen oriented, but we won't go there. Like, it's tough, man. And then throw in the fact that Smart is such a utility player that he can guard, it's a switching defense a lot of times, and he's going to switch on to anyone. So you guys know as well as I do, Chris, like, he'll guard a 5, a true post or power forward just as efficiently as he'll guard, a point guard. And so that's pretty unique. You don't see many players that can do that. And, you hear the announcers all the time, whether it be Stan or any of them, all the time talk about how he, it's not an advantage. If he's stuck on the post, that's not an advantage for the offensive post guy if Smart's on. You hear him say that all the time. And so I just think he's very diverse, that he can guard the 1 through 5 position, literally. He's stuck with guarding ball screens constantly. That's a tough thing to do. If you've never done it, it's the hardest thing to do, in my opinion, defensively. And then the fact that it's just such a guard league that it's time to recognize a guard. I mean, come on. Since the 90s, mid 90s that we've done that. So yeah, I'm biased, but I think you guys would agree, and anyone that's watched Smart play, he does things that don't show up in statistics. I mean, does anyone have a dive on loose ball statistic? We don't have that one. No one has that. So, those don't get charted, and those are things that change games and win games. And so there's a lot that's not statted that we could also sit here and talk about that I think would add on to why I think he should deserve it. But I just think it's time. It's really cool to see the love that he's getting from multiple people. I mean, it's been pretty cool. And he appreciates that, whether he gets it or not. It's been cool for him to see that. It kind of shows the love that people have for him and his style of play. So whether he gets it or not, it's still really cool to see what's happening.
Yeah, and the ballots are starting to roll in and get posted online. I feel pretty confident that he's going to be in that mix. You got to hope that the broadcasters that only see him twice a year are aware and are watching. But yeah, I told him last week, it's so frustrating because I'd love to have a metric about, boxing out a big man and allowing another forward to swoop in for the rebound. Like, there's not many point guards. Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's really hard to quantify, unlike the big men who we can do all these blocks and the basic metrics on. So it has been cool. 1996, Gary Payton. That's the other thing that's going to help him. Gary Payton coming out and saying that Marcus Smart should be the defensive player of the year. Hopefully that makes voters perk up.
That is cool. And his teammates are all done. There's been, Grant's like his number one PR guy right now.
Let's end on this. What do you think happens next for Marcus Smart? Now that he's sort of, he's got the contract, he's got that security, he's proven himself. Like, what does the future hold for Marcus Smart?
I don't think he looks past the next game. So the answer to that is, I don't think there's any, he just wants to win tomorrow's game. And in this case, I guess it would be Sunday's game. So that's where he keeps his focus right now. And he is, that's kind of what makes him unique. So I don't think there's any big vision down the road. He's a pretty, like I said, his circle's small. His routine's pretty routine. Summer, he'll train hard in the summer. But right now, his only concern is Sunday. That is right, Sunday, right?
Yeah, it is. I can't divulge more than that right now because I'm not even sure. It all depends.
Chris, we need to talk afterwards because I need to buy some flights. But yeah, Sunday is his number one concern, and they're looking excited. Everyone's talking about who you match up with. I mean, as far as he's concerned, and I think really the whole team is concerned, they'll play anybody. I mean, if you're trying to win it all, you can't try to not play someone in the first round. So you're gonna play them eventually.
Yeah, well, I can't wait. We are taping this before the Nets and Cavs tip off tonight. I can't wait to see who emerges from that. Kenny, thank you so much for your time. We'll take this offline. I'll give you whatever other insight I can give you.
You guys are awesome, and I follow you guys. I appreciate y'all big time.
All right, good stuff there from Kenny. again, he's been with Marcus along this whole journey. Great insight into how Marcus was able to manage it all and get to where he is. I need everybody to go like, subscribe. There's still more stuff coming. Busy week. I haven't really left my basement, just watching games, getting ready for the Celtics playoffs, getting these Celtics Talk podcasts ready, writing a million articles. I hope you're all checking it out. Check out the videos up at NBCSportsBoston.com with our staff, all reflecting on this year. Check out all those Celtics Talk pods from earlier in the week. Make sure you're checking out the YouTube versions as well, so you can see us talking about all these fun things. We'll catch you next time on the Celtics Talk podcast.